I lived in China for more than 20 years. And when I came back to the UK, my children could not continue their studies about China in the education system in the UK. And that to me seems like a really serious problem, because the world is going through incredible changes where there's a huge shift. It's an inevitable shift of wealth and power and confidence from the West to the East. And we have to learn how to live together.
Yes.
So I felt that there was, tremendous lack of understanding about China, particularly in the UK, and that worried me, because there are two things about that. So in a nutshell, I think that generally, especially the leadership, Chinese people understand more about us than we understand about the Chinese, right? So from the foreigner's perspective, that's a problem, because it gives Chinese a competitive advantage in this process. It's actually a problem for the Chinese people as well, because if foreigners don't understand the real intention and motivations of Chinese people, that's a danger, because they can misjudge an intention. Yeah,
absolutely.
So that's why I'm so passionate about it. We have a very, very urgent and pressing need to understand China. So as you know, in the West, there are hawks and there are doves. Okay, so there are some people who think that China is like a terrible threat to us, right? So in Western society, there's only one thing that unites both the doves and the hawks about China, and that is we need to understand it better.
Oh, that's good to know.
That's very good to know. So what I was trying to do was to find poems that express things that are easy for foreigners to understand. So the first thing is that they're so ancient, right? So the foreigner generally will say, I had no idea that these poems were written 1,300 years ago. And then if
aren't you worried that it's useless to study something that's 1,300 years old, because
So that is the exact opposite. That was the thing that I found so amazing, because all the poems are about current problems, right? So Liu Zongyuan wrote a poem about the problems of excess logging on the environment, cutting down too many trees. The totally current problem.
Oh my goodness.
Du Fu is a refugee. Yeah. Bai Juyi wrote about tax
internally
evasion.
Displaced. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Sure. But it's still, massive problem for Europe is the refugee problem, and Bai Juyi, and Du Fu spent most of his life displaced.
It's a bit like, the more it changes, the more it doesn't change, right? It's all what people say, under the sun there is nothing new, especially when you have a 5,000, for European culture as well, you have extremely millennia-long civilization, so you have experienced all of these. We have decided that we will try to illustrate what we talk about, and it's called Mai Tan Weng, the old man who sells charcoal. And this is a good test of whether what you say just now is true, because you say these ancient wisdom can stand the test of time. Let's try that in just a moment, but let's first try to read a few lines, read maybe one stanza of this poem. It was written by Bai Juyi from the Tang Dynasty. He lived from 772 CE to 846 CE, so that's 1,300 something like that years ago. And it's about an old man who sells charcoal.
卖炭王发现烧炭南山中，满脸尘灰烟火色，满鬓苍苍失纸黑，卖炭折钱何所营？
The old man who sells charcoal, cuts firewood, burns it up on Southern Hill. Grimmed with ash, face streaked with smoke from the fire, his grey hair grizzled, each finger inking black. What living can he make from this miserable fuel? The clothes on his back, the food in his mouth, so wretched, his coat so thin, yet anxious his fuel might lose value, he longs for icy weather.
So for me, this poem and the rest of it too conjures up an image, very strong visual image of a very poor man, all of it black because the charcoal is the important thing. And this man's terribly poor, yet even though he's poor and his clothes are freezing cold, and later on he sits down in some slush by the southern gate, melted snow, because he's so exhausted. Even though he's in this pitiful state, he still wants the weather to be colder, because that means the price of his fuel will go up. So he's so desperate that he'll bear the pain of the ice. And that to me is not only very visual, but it's also something that tells me that Bai Juyi understood the relationship between supply, demand, and price. Centuries before it was articulated in the West, and I think that that's quite interesting as well.